Hi, and welcome wherever you are in the world to Survival Metrics. How to be fast, data informed, and safe as you pivot. Does your team trust you? I want to take you back to 2015. We're going to talk about a company called Bobco. They're a fintech company. They're doing rather well. In fact, they have $6 million in profit. Their customer satisfaction is pretty high, and the NPS is in about the 40s. Right, they're doing pretty well. Also, there's a high morale. Everybody on the team just loves working there. In fact, they haven't lost a single person in years. And so, riding high, they decided to invest in two things. One, a modernization of their entire platform. And two, a chatbot to set up and show how much they cared about new technology. Let's fast forward to 2017. Layoffs. The company was forced to lay off 50% of its workforce. The modernization was over budget by 200%. The chatbot failed and brought MBS down from a winning 40 down to about zero. Morale was awful, and those that stayed started pointing fingers. So, how did we get from 2015, where we had positive cash flow and customer satisfaction and high morale, to 2017, where we're hemorrhaging cash, have confused customers, and low internal trust? And not just that, the biggest sin, wasted time. Whether you're doing a startup or a big business, time is the thing that you cannot buy back. And as a result of the time that they'd missed, they weren't just dealing with external pressures, but internal as well, right? Teams that were there were unsure if they could even make decisions, right? Throughout the last 2 years and even now, there was no data clarity. Every decision was gut-based, and the company values weren't applied. So everybody from leadership on down didn't feel moored. They didn't feel connected to the mission that they were doing. And so, we have a level of failure, right? And if this isn't really a new thing, the startup failure isn't new. This is something that happens to a lot of companies. In fact, a majority, the biggest reasons that companies fail is an inability to know when they're working on the wrong thing. And so let's go to the Agile Manifesto. For those who are wondering about agility, right? And they keep hearing this word agile, agile, agile. Well, the thing that built agile is fairly small. You're looking at the entirety of it right in front of you. And so we could just read it here. It's individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. And so this part, or this presentation, is really going to focus on the last one, responding to change over following a plan. And so what hampered Bobco and what hampers a lot of companies is this idea that they're going to put out a roadmap, and that roadmap is going to be a perfect representation of what it needs to happen for them to have some sort of market success. For everyone in this audience that has done product development before, we all know that is patently untrue. And so the Agile Manifesto was a way for folks that were doing product development to be able to react to waterfall and this idea that we're going to be able to make big plans. We're we have had decades of agile, but we're still not really engaging with the message of agile. And so we end up with situations like Bobco, where you have this big strategy up front, you have these ideas, and right? The market doesn't know, but what's going to happen in 12 months. When the truth is, if you're not able to adjust, then you're not really responding to change. You're not really flowing with a complex market. You're being arrogant. And so let's take that thought and go to a desert island, right? So let's just say you're on a desert island. I think the rules are the same. If you want to change, you have to rely on what I call the 3 pillars of change. You need to be fast. How fast is your decision velocity? You need to be data informed. You need to understand what reality is, and you need to be in a politically safe place. So on a desert island, let's take these and go through them one by one. On a desert island, you need to be fast. You need to be able to make decisions quickly. So if you're going to be making the decision on what to eat, figuring out what to eat and fast allows you to make decisions later about if you want to store food or if you want to use it to trade, whatever, right? The faster you make that decision, the better. You need to be data informed. What those decisions are need to be tied to reality. So you can't drink sand and you can't eat water, right? And so you want to make sure that you're looking at the right things, and those things actually match what you need, right? You have to be in a real place. You need to use data, not just the data that's in front of you, but you need to use context and reality to move your ideas forward. And it needs to be politically safe, right? You need partnership, whether it's with the land or who may be on the island or the animals or whoever, right? You need to create some sort of bond where you can have an area of safety where you can start to think about how you want to move forward, right? And so, again, that's no different than it is in product development. You need the ability to be fast. You need the ability to be data informed, and you need the ability to be politically safe. And as product managers, I think it's our responsibility to really hold these 3 things inside of a company and be the pillar of change, right? And if you want change, you're going to have to be able to do these things effectively. Let's go through each one by one. So when I talked about fast, I was talking about decision velocity. And because you want to be able to make decisions fast, you want to be able to have those decisions be smaller, pre-made, and simple, right? You want people to be able to just decide quickly. And so I was working with a SaaS company, and before, the team was unsure of how they could make decisions. They didn't know what they were doing in terms of speed. And so they sat there and thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. After working with them on their decision velocity, we pushed it until they were shipping about 6 times faster with the same people, same circumstances. They were able to do that. And so that's the power of increasing your decision velocity, is things with the same amount of people, you're able to ship much faster. Let's talk about being data informed, right? So being data informed and increasing the information around the company by servicing decisions, being clear about the type of data and leaving a decision trail, right? So every change that changes the status of something should be put in front of the people that are affected by that change, right? There's a lot of noise inside of companies where they'll talk about things that, lagging indicators that don't really move the needle, like revenue, or they'll talk about things that, seem like they're useful. This is what people mostly call surface metrics or vanity metrics, right? How many hits did a page get? Doesn't really change the needle or move people. There's also a confusion about the types of data, right? There are two types of data. There's quantitative, and then there's qualitative, right? Quantitative are the numbers, metrics that we're used to seeing. Qualitative speaks to the story generally. And so being clear about them and being clear about the rules that exist for both uh, can help you become more data informed. And lastly, you're not data informed if you're not informed about the decisions you make, right? So writing down those decisions and being able to go back and reference them and talk about them is super important. And that matters for, political safety, but you have to have them somewhere to be able to talk to them. And so we worked with a social impact startup, and before they weren't able to define if a project was break even or profit driven, right? They didn't have the data around it other than just revenue to make this decision. And afterwards, we worked with them and we created a baseline for projects to help the teams be able to put them into specific buckets that tied back to their vision, right? And so, for example, they didn't know if they should make a minimum if they should make a minimum sale of 5 widgets or 8 widgets or 10 widgets in order to make a profitable decision, or is it worth making it 3 widgets because it's an investment? We were able to take that information, put it together, and make a baseline for them that helped them as a leadership team understand what they were doing when it came to being data informed and politically safe, right? I talked about writing down those decisions, but if you can't talk about those decisions, why write them, right? And so it's important to increase your political safety in your teams by living your values, combining culture with the data, and making sure every voice is heard. So you want to iterate and reiterate with and engage with your values frequently. Are they really your values? Do you care about them, right? And if you do care about them, how do they show up in your product? Data should live with the culture, not siloed, right? There are no such things as data teams, right? Every team is a data team. Every team works with a piece of the platform and has some understanding that other teams don't. And your job as a product person is to really understand what those different pieces of data are, and then help create with your leadership an environment that it strives to the last point where every voice is heard. You want to talk to these different teams. You want them to understand what drives them, so that they're part of the picture as you move forward. And so working with an enterprise, there was a clash between product and sales. I know, very rare, right? There was a clash between product and sales. They were unsure of each other's incentives, right, at the end of the day. But the truth is, they just didn't know each other. And so you start creating conversation points, connection points, where product and sales can sit down and understand what each other's incentive is. And next thing you know, you find out that product didn't understand how they segmented based on deal size, and sales didn't understand the product strategy. And so these are very easy fixes. Once you understand what the teams are after, and from our point of view as product people, where are we actually trying to go, right? And so sales can now build based on the product strategy and then go sell that. And then product can make sure that as they think about features, as we think about where we want to take the product strategy, we can look at things that are going to move the needle for revenue. And so it's question time. Jump in the chat here, and which one of these pillars do you feel like your team could improve upon? Just go ahead and type fast, data informed, or politically safe. And for bonus points, toss a why in there. Why is this important to you? And so we're going to give you about a minute or two. We'll give you another 15 seconds. Get those answers in. All right. So we'll talk about these a bit more. And if you feel like you have some thoughts, feel free to jump in and throw them into the chat here, right? Ask questions. Your moderator will collect them and we'll talk about them afterwards. But also, if you're thinking about fast, data informed, and politically safe through this talk, just use the chat and share what you're thinking. Let's go back to Bobco. Now, remember they missed out on these three pillars. Bobco wasn't fast. It wasn't being data informed, and they weren't feeling any political safety. So, in a sense, they were that desert island. And so, as you could see, in 2015, they went from that positive cash flow, customer satisfaction, and high morale to 2017, where they were hemorrhaging cash, had confused customers, and had low internal trust. So the founders stopped what they were doing and wisely decided to hire a new head of product. Jill came in with a mandate, right? She needed to change the culture of product development throughout the organization. And so 2 years later, where did we land? Bobco is hiring again. They're working their way through the red. In fact, they broke even and started to recover from those losses. They had their customer satisfaction scores go up, and their NPS went from that 0 to about a 20, and it was trending northwards. And then, yeah, as I said, they were hiring again. And most importantly, people were talking, right? Teams were talking. People felt comfortable to engage with each other. So a lot of the silos that existed were starting to break. And so, yeah, she came in and started talking about these pillars of change. First with leadership, and then as she got to know everyone else, started to get them to buy into these three pillars. We want to be fast, we want to be data informed, and we want to be politically safe, right? And not just that, she wanted to make it real, right? How do you make those pillars real? How do you increase that decision velocity? How do you communicate clearly? And how do you make sure that you unearth the incentives that are going to, that drive people, right? And make them feel safe because they feel heard? What's a way to actually take those three pillars and, as the slide says, make it real? Survival metrics, right? So what Jill did is she spent about 6 months really learning the company, and eventually called for a all hands, where she came together, took her findings, put them together, and put this concept on the board. She said, we're going to talk about survival metrics. And specifically, right, what survival metrics is it helps teams by making the decisions that they have to make about an active product simpler, pre-made, and clear, so that they're able to pivot when something's not working. Remember, Bobco had an issue of how can we make sure that we're actually working on the thing that matters? And so to help that, there are 3 buckets. Talking about decision velocity, there are 3 buckets here. You have your stop statements, where if something is worth stopping, just stop it, right? We don't have to have a conversation about it. If it's breaking some sort of rule, hit the button, let's stop, let's talk immediately. There are things that we need to sit back and reconsider, right? They're not very, they're not things that are going to change the world, but like they're things that give us pause. So when we have our regular breaks, we want to sit and talk about these things, and they may lead to pivots. And not just to include things that may go wrong, there are things that go right. And so we have to think about what we want to invest in. And if it's something that, really tells us that the market is burning for this past our expectations, let's invest, let's shift. And so when putting this in play, the teams went in 2017, they were unsure if they could make decisions because the decision velocity was slow and low. By 2019, they were able to change direction and do so while following the vision that they had in front of them. And they were able to do what I call a hallmark of mature companies, mature product organizations. They were able to kill projects. And for those that are listening that have not ever killed or sunset a product, I think I'm not sure if there's a product strategy where you are. I will be very clear and blunt there. If you're not adjusting to what's happening in the marketplace, and that adjustment doesn't include sunsetting or getting rid of things that we thought were worth it but aren't, how much conviction do you have in your product strategy and vision? And so Bobco was able to kill more features in the first 6 months of doing this than they killed in their entire company's existence, right? They were actually now thinking and responding to change, right? Instead of just following a plan. So the next thing was being data informed. And so she walked them through what we talked about earlier, right? Being very clear about what's important, and then also qualitative and quantitative data points, and then also decision making, right? And keeping that listed. And so they were able to start making data informed survival metrics like this. If the problem definition research is not aligned in a reasonable way, that more than 35% of our participants are confused after we introduce a scenario, the problem is not clear, right? That's a stop statement that stops things at the pass. Maybe we're working on the wrong problem. Let's have some numbers around that so that we can make a decision. The operations team was worried about things going out of hand, right? They had just had that data modernization that came in way over budget. And so now that they were very conscious of that. And so, they had pivot statements around the company around their AWS bill. If it's projected to jump more than 10% due to a production release, let's talk about it, right? If we're going over budget, then we need to talk about it, right? And same thing with the invest statement. If people are really excited, then we need to be able to shift, right, into a new place. We need to be able to shift our resources into following through on what we believe in. And so for 2017, they went from no data clarity, gut-based decisions to having that data up front, and the confidence in the data that they did have increased. Again, another hallmark of a mature company, which is there's tension early in the product, right? Jeff Bezos has this concept of disagree and commit. Well, the first part of that is disagree. People in a place where people can talk and get their points of view across, to make sure that they're heard and make sure that we have all the data on the table is important. And then committing, right, brings us to being politically safe. And so at Bobco, they cared about privacy. And so they made that a rule up front. If there's any reason we have to grab information from third-party people, sources, things, well, we're just going to kill that product immediately, right? And so this is for their chat feature. Just scrap it. If we haven't demonstrated the features to our marketing team and our PMMs are not involved in 75% of the prototyping sessions, we have to shift our priorities, right? Marketing felt like they were siloed. And if marketing's not involved, then they have every right to feel siloed. And if we're not getting them in, then we have to change. Something has to change. We need to talk about it. We believe in our customer centricity. And so if we have a baseline of what people share, if it's over 50%, then let's just invest more, right? Because we really believe in customer centricity and having them lead us. And so people didn't care about the company values, and they felt flimsy in 2017. To 2019, those values, as you can see from those metrics, are getting put right into development. And what that leads to is less pooping and swooping from management. And for those that don't know what I mean by poop and swoop, I mean leadership coming by and saying, how about you work on this, right? Generally, when I talk to founders and execs, they do that as a reaction of feeling like they're not being heard. And for some of you, you probably go, wait, I listen to everything they say. Well, yes, you do, but for some reason it's not reaching them. And so generally the easiest way to alleviate that, in my experience, is to get those ideas into the development and what you're doing, and they can see it more often, and they can relax a bit more and focus on what's important to them, which is more vision and mission. That's where they're useful. So how do you make this real, right? How do you make it real? Jill made it real. How do you go make it real? Well, the first thing I have to mention before I talk about anything operational, and I think this stands for everything you see here, your mileage may vary, and it's important that you know the culture that you're in. This is just an ideal. This is how Jill goes about it. This is how I go about it, but you know your culture better than I know it, right? So take the spirit of these things and use it to move forward. But here's how I generally go about it. You want to keep these three questions in your head around the three pillars. Around the three buckets, right? Around stop, pivot, and invest. You want to know what the non-negotiables are for your team. You want to know how much you're willing to have this initiative cost us. And you want to know what markers to see to commit more resources. I think the last one is one I really want to highlight here, because there's nothing worse than hearing from a manager or a executive, oh, if you would have told me, then we would have given you an extra, X, right? That's why it's important to really get that information, because knowing that and having that very clear for the rest of the organization, again, helps them decide. Once you get all this information, right, it's going to be a lot. And, part of your job is going to be going ahead and translating what you see, right? You need to turn them into statements, right, that include metrics. What's important? What are the incentives? And that's where understanding these incentives and understanding some of the numbers that you're going to get back is going to be very important. You're going to want to prioritize them. Think about the values. Think about the culture. Think about what they're telling the market. Just your standard prioritization, right? You have to think about these things. And you want to cut things down, right? You want to cut per team. You want to get about 5 to 7. That's important. So give it a good thought, and then start to chop them down. And then you want to go communicate, right? If this lives in your head, it doesn't live. And so where do you communicate this? Everywhere. Sprint planning meetings, retros, all hands. Communicate. Spend your time talking about this till people can repeat it back to you, right? If they're really things that are moving the needle, then people will appreciate hearing it. And so you want to create a cadence, right? You want to keep doing this over and over and over again. You want to get the information, talk to folks, translate it, prioritize. Talk about it, translate, prioritize. Because survival metrics aren't just something that you do once, right? Back to our Agile manifesto, the fourth point You should be responding to change. If these things are not helping you respond to change, then they are not survival metrics. And so that's why this cadence is important, to make sure that you're responding. And you should be answering these questions, right? Are you able to react to current circumstances fast enough to build more market share? Do teams feel more informed? Do they feel informed enough to challenge first ideas? And again, I think this one is worth double clicking on. You want the tension. If there's no tension, then I don't think teams feel data informed. Right? They're just going along with whatever the hippo says. Also, the last point, first ideas. Have you ever had a first idea that was magical? Probably not. However, at work, teams generally go with the first idea and take it right to the marketplace. If you're not challenging those things, you're not a data-informed company, and I'd argue you're not politically safe either, probably, right? And speaking of that, are the values translating into those initiatives? And for teams, when this works, right, you see individual team members deciding quicker. They're comfortable using data, and they feel safer because they know what the values. They have it. They're clutching them, right? For the team, this ability to kill, right, through quicker decision velocity, and having those values tied to incentives in a shared language helps them move faster and better. And for the organization, right, you get to your vision faster. You have higher investment confidence in the things that you're putting things into, right? You have better data coming back to you at the executive level. And eventually, your true values are revealed, because what moves the company is the value, or is the value system of that company, right? And some of that's just going to be natural on how these teams evolve. At first, you start with value statements that you think about, but then your organization takes them, and it becomes a part of your organization. So it's important to see what those true values are, and then live them. So let's use survival metrics, right? Through that, looking at the Bobco example, they wasted 2 years, and now they're on a sustainable trajectory of success. They were building things that had a market need, that really tied to their value system, which gave them some real differentiation, and they were getting back to being the market leaders. And as a team, they felt way more connected. And so through the survival metrics, they were able to rebound and rebuild. And so I offer you the same opportunity. Do you want to, if you're really thinking about the Agile Manifesto, you need ways to, you need a way to make it more real. And so for those who are ready to respond to change over following a plan, the survival metrics gives you an opportunity to actually keep an eye on how your company moves and changes, rather than the plan or the idea of it. And so use survival metrics. Let's talk about it now. For those who would like to give me feedback, please, 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 I love feedback. I'm going to give you a second here to get your phones up and to scan this QR code. Also, there should be a link in the chat. You can follow that, and that link will lead you to a place where you can just fill out the information. Everybody that fills out that information, afterwards, I will answer every question, and I will send it back to everyone as alongside some reading and some notes, as a gift to really follow up and dig into this concept. So please go ahead and fill that out. I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes here to fill this out. All right, and there we are. So we're gonna jump into Q&A. I'm gonna switch over into real life, and yeah, we'll have that Q&A session. And if you need more time, use the Q&A session to fill out that feedback form. Once again, thank you, thank you, thank you all for listening, and let's have a conversation.
Adam, hey, hey, you made us to reflect a lot just at the beginning, showing us the Agile Manifesto and giving us like looking at like zooming on the uh, respond to change rather than following our brilliant plans. And yeah, and it resonated me a lot as I was part of a startup like 15 years ago where it was kind of similar to Bobco, and it was really tough to get out of that. So, as a first question, I would like to ask you about. You mentioned in at some part about the increasing the tension before doing the investments, and so initially it sounds wow. Increased tensions looks like something we don't like to do, but you mentioned increase the tension before making investments. Could you please explain a little more, deep, a little, go a little deeper on that?
Sure. And so when I'm talking about tension, I think it's worth unpacking. Yeah, what is tension? What do I mean by that? And then also, why is it great? Right. So what I mean by tension is um, we're all in this thing, right? This relationship as we build and develop products, and uh, we all have different incentives at the end of the day, and that creates tension, right? Sales has a revenue incentive. Product has probably a quality incentive. Engineering has engineering definitely has a quality incentive. Let me rephrase that, right? Um, Product has a, somewhere between experience and a kind of diplomatic moving forward intention or intention, right? And so all of these are not going to match at the same time. And because of that, there's going to be tension. Now, the tension that I talk about is closely related to what Seth Godin calls tension, right? Which is basically how do we discuss those different incentives, right? How do we act on them when we're in a collective room? And I think the tension is always there, right? I think when I talk about tension and exposing it early, is I'm trying to get the team collectively engaging in that tension to surface that tension first, right? For us to talk about it, and then have the argument early. Because if we keep it subconscious, we're going to invest, and we're going to believe we're on the same page when we aren't, and we're just going to start to drift off, right? Like in that enterprise example, sales is drifting off into revenue numbers. Where us in product are drifting off into following what the company vision is, and these things will start to go off like this, and then there's big tension, right? When it's not talked about and it's unconscious, when we hit it, we hit it hard, and we have lasting consequences. So when I talk about talking about and servicing that tension, I really think about Jeff Bezos' disagree and commit. Right, we have to have it out in some way, shape, or form. It's best to do it in a controlled space very early before we've all told our bosses and we've all committed to this idea, so that by the time that we've gotten to this, we've disagreed on what we needed to disagree on, and we've committed, and so we're aligned as we move forward.
So, connecting with the previous talk about politics and about how we should manage all the all the relationships between people, I wonder how we as product managers could help to make from those tensions to make productive conversations and avoid having winners and losers, because we need everyone when taking decisions. We need to have everyone uh, moving forward and doing their best to succeed.
I think as my thesis on product management is that our jobs as product managers is to help the teams that we work with to make better decisions consistently. And there's a political portion of that we have to engage with, because decisions aren't just logical things, right? It's are irrational things, right? There are a lot of emotions that are tied to decisions. I talk about survival, right? That's really an emotion, right? A lot of times that's an emotion. And I think for us as product people, we have somewhat of a luxury. Sometimes it's a curse, but sometimes it's a luxury of not really having discrete outputs that we're due to give, right? We can leverage that space to say, I don't have a dog in this fight in some way, shape, or form, and just be a translator and a facilitator for these conversations, right? Sometimes that means we're going to have to do a little bit more therapy. Sometimes people will dump onto us, as it were. But I think at our best, we're a trusted source, so that when we are facilitating these conversations, people see us as ultimately what we're here to do, right? Which is to guide us all to better decisions.
Yeah, sometimes it happened, especially, for example, in my experience, I worked in a really big company many years ago, and it was the focus of product management had to be the opposite, to influence in such a way that tension happened, because it was cheaper for the career of people to add functionality and to invest rather than to cut functionality. So sometimes it depends on the context. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's where product leadership is. They're avoiding. People don't want to be there long term when that thinking is holding on, because the incentive when that type of thinking has taken over is how fast can we pump things out? How do we just kind of get out of here without doing really the work of having a really good quality product? And I would argue that the political safety of that place is extremely low, right? Because people don't feel like they're having they don't have the opportunity to really express ideas. It's more about just getting things out, and really just the fastest, cheapest way for us to do that is just kind of following along. I think if you're in that situation, it's worth investigating or spending some time before implementing this, understanding why that exists, right? And if that place is not for you, great. If you feel like you can change it, great. If you like working that way, right? I would say throw out this and focus on being a delivery expert, right? Think about the context in which you are, and make a decision based on that.
Oh, great. Thank you. We have one question from the audience. Do you have any tips to combat the first idea bias?
Yes. The first thing, one is just telling yourself that the first idea is probably bad, right? Just making that a mantra as you talk to your triad or however your cross-functional group is, just start there, right? And I mean, think about experience, right? Which MVP, if we say we're an agile place, which MVP has ever been perfect, right? I think starting there. I think the other thing is, I think this falls back to the last point, right? By disagreeing and committing, and there are a lot of models that are created through that tension. There are a lot of ideas for us to go down. Exploring and validating those things very cheaply, and having a time kind of dedicated to we're just going to see where all these things go, right? Is a good way to really see, and I think it proves out, right? The first idea rarely is the best. The Hippo's idea is probably never the best. and we're just going to cheaply figure this out as fast as possible. Right, that's where again this all kind of connects. Right, this is where decision velocity comes into play. Right, the faster you're able to validate, make these decisions with these very cheap prototypes, you have a data-informed way of raising political safety by saying, okay, we tried X, Y, Z. Here's the data around it. We did this in a week. Hey, the first idea doesn't work, but if we merge idea 2 and 3, we can come up with this fourth one that I think solves this, this, and this. And so that's a way for us to get out of that first kind of that first idea bias, and for us to think about the power of merging ideas.
Wow, excellent. Thanks for your response. We have a last question from the audience. You mentioned companies that never sunset the product. Have you seen examples of people who are too quick to sunset a product?
I'll be honest, that's like the example of have you found a company that talks to too many customers? Right? Like, I'm sure it's theoretically possible, but I've like never seen it. I think sunsetting, probably the sooner the better, right? This is what survival metrics is about, is really taking whatever you're building and tying it back to your mission, your vision, right? And the sooner you can knock out things, the better, right? I think most companies and teams generally, like, it's kind of the same realm as talking to customers. Like, you're probably not doing it enough. Like, I'm pretty sure you're not doing it enough, right? And I've yet to see the company that is doing it too much. Right? I'm sure, again, theoretically, I'm sure there's a company that's talking to way too many customers and closing loops too fast. I've never seen it.
Yeah, because we usually tend to get in love with our ideas and with our products, rather than it is very difficult to sunset a product. I agree with you. Very, very tough. So what I see from your talk is that you helped us to stop in the day by day, and I hope the audience also, all people in the audience could see this as a good great talk for reflecting about what we are doing, why we are doing, how to get informed decisions, and what happened if we continue like doing and moving forward as a way to escape to nowhere, as you mentioned with Bobco, with the old Bobco. So we appreciate a lot your talk and your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you everybody for joining. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Awesome.